This is a production of Cornell University.
Okay, so my presentation is how do you know your pricing is right? And come on down. This is part of a program. Oops, there we go. That I was funded for through the Northeast Risk Management Extension grants, part of USDA and NEFA. This is a collaboration with No for New York and Food Justice Certified. So it's a broader program. My part is a section on that. We're really looking at how to be more accurate with pricing, and that starts with understanding cost of production. The other part in this that I won't cover today, but in the chat box, I have a link to a survey. We're looking to help to get farmers to fill out, and we can, through our team, be able to put together some assistance dealing with labor and other business type issues that you might be having as part of the Agricultural Justice Project. So it's a little bit of a long survey, but you get results from it, and and you'll be contacted if you wish, and we can help you with going through a lot of what's going on and looking at labor here. So let's get started. There are a lot of steps, as you know, getting going in vegetable production, and so lots of things to keep track of. But every step along the way, it seems, it's costing you money, one way or the other. So I want to like lay the groundwork on this, for everyone to understand where the costs are coming from, keeping track of them, so that when you need a lot of information to accurately create a price that is going to both reflect recovery of your costs of production, your own wages of your workers, and eventually that it leads to a profit at the end of the day that can be reinvested back into the business. But along the way, it's also going to give you a lot of financial information that is going to be really critical for you to making decisions for your business. So it's not enough anymore to know just how to grow plants. It's not enough to know how to use the latest equipment. You've got to be able to afford the latest equipment. You have to be able to afford the crazy high prices for used equipment. It's not enough, I think, to sell just at farmers markets or CSAs unless you've got your numbers down. So you need to be on top of your financial situation to make these strong business decisions. So you've got to, so that entity of being a business manager is coming out loud and clear in this. And everybody goes, oh, I got so many crops to keep track of, especially if you're a diversified operation. You may have 60, 70 different types of crops out there. And we know this is the situation. And, but there are ways of handling it on this, and so, I'll give you the groundwork and you can move on from there. So what should I be getting, for whatever crop you're growing? Over the years, this is one of the most common questions I get, just around when harvest starts. I mean, I have 5 acres of beans. How much do I sell them for? Where do I sell them? These types of questions. So my reply to this is, well, what did it cost you to grow it? Because there's no way I can give you a number that will accurately reflect your particular situation. Growers often reply to me to that is, well, I know I paid so much for seed, and I pay a lot for labor. But other than that, you know, it's there. It's lost. You know, so figuring out cost of production is really important. You know, like I said, really provides important information. So you know, you need to know, you know, to set prices. You want to run your business, so you need this information there. I mean, if you're filing taxes on that, there's a lot of that information you fill in on a Schedule F. You know, you're going to want to purchase some equipment. Can you afford to do that? What do you want? You know, if you want to grow more, what do you need to expand the operation? You know, there's a lot to it. It seems like the bigger you want to be, the more exponential the costs are. Can I afford to hire workers? With higher labor costs, you really need to know if you can afford this, and that's a, you know, and first and foremost, you've got to be able to pay yourself a living wage before you can afford to hire more workers or pay them what they need. Now, then you're looking at the markets you're going to. Is that market really making you money? You really need to analyze that. Over the years, I've visited a lot of farmers markets, watch how some operations set up their pricing. It just seems like they just make it up as they go along. And if they end up with a fistful of dollars at the end of the day, they think they've really done well. But do they really know what it costs them to do that? You know, part of production. Do you know which tasks is costing you the most money? Yeah, I bet everybody can say, oh, weeding is probably right up there. But what else? There may be other things. So, and then you need to figure out, so where and how can I become more efficient if some of these activities are really costing me a lot of money? And then, you know, one of the most important ones, can I make a living from this income? This question I am hearing over and over again from growers who are probably approaching the 7-year mark in business. They're looking at improving profits, comes from improving efficiency. You know, and that's been an answer from Extension for a long time, or an industry. Well, you got to become more efficient. You got to become more efficient. But how do you know that becoming more efficient is even affordable? You know, what does it take to become more efficient? You have to be able to answer these questions. One of the ways, you know, profits can be improved by raising prices, and knowing your costs is critical into figuring this out accurately. And I hope by the end of today that you'll start seriously thinking about how, you know, how your pricing might be changed in order to improve. And if people have questions, you know, after this presentation, or, you know, if you think of things down the road, don't hesitate to give me a call or an email. I'd be happy to work with you on this. Some years back, I conducted a survey. It was sort of a broader topic, but part of the questioning was asking farmers about how they set their prices. And I set up some multiple choice questions. You know, and so for this particular question, how do you set your prices? One of the options was whatever the farmer next to me at the farmer's market charges, or whatever the grocery store charges. That's what I base my information on. I put this one in there to see if anybody actually really guessed at their prices. And so I've received back about 115, 120 or so responses to the survey. So it sort of broke out this way. About 96% fell into these three categories. What scared me to death was seeing that 30% people said they guessed. But that's one. You know, I hope they were just kidding. But I had 4% said they actually figured out their costs first. So I thought, well, there's hope. So this is an important point. Another question I asked was about, you know, do you think you're being profitable? Is your operation where you want it to be? Are you making enough money? that 96% said would like to think so, but they're not really sure. And part of the reason it came down to was record keeping. Everybody hates that. But they really did not have a handle on, they had an idea, but they didn't really have an accurate handle on there. 4% said yes, they did, that they did know that they were being profitable. And those turned out to be the same 4% who answered that they did they knew their costs. So a little lesson there, I think. But I can understand everybody think, how am I going to figure this stuff out? It's a real headache. I'm not an accountant. And personally, I took an accounting course, and I can understand people's hesitancy about trying to dive into accountants and doing any sort of accountant work. It's boring. It's hard to keep things straight. But if you can balance a checkbook, then you probably can do this reasonably well. But it takes time. And it really starts off with being able to, keep good records, and you have to find all your records, maybe on the dashboard of your truck or behind the seat or somewhere. But you should start getting into the habit of really trying to keep good records so you can get back, and use them to your advantage. If you're an organic grower, or you're doing food safety audits, certifications, you're probably already keeping records. So you're halfway there. And record keeping, it's a lot like weeding. If you don't keep up with it, you're going to get buried. And at some point, that information that could have been harvested is going to be lost. And you've missed an opportunity to have some of that detail that you really want in there. So getting into this, so what I want to do is really start building the case for of identifying your costs, putting it together, and there's some into a crop budgets, and then analyzing your costs versus your selling price. I've looked over the years trying to find some easy to use programs or things that are really relevant to the Northeast, and even to New York. But a lot of it is out of date. There's just two sources that I've worked with that's really that has done a really decent job with it. One is, and I'll get to this in a few minutes, but University of Massachusetts a few years back put together some cost of production sheets. And then also that was around the year about 20 years ago, I guess. And then about 10 or 12 years ago, a Vermont farmer named Richard Wiswall, he really sat down, put pencil to paper and figured it out for his vegetable operation. And then he ended up writing a book about it and included a CD in it with spreadsheets and budget sheets for each crop that he grew, which is very, very useful. And a lot of my examples come from his work because I think it's still very relevant today, and it does lines up pretty well with what our costs are in New York. So I'll get you more information about that as I go along. But so between those two, I've kind of built this whole presentation around. So you're looking at figuring out all your inputs, everything that's been purchased to grow your crop. And then you've got your practices. So whatever the activities needed to grow those crops, you need to keep track of time. How long did it take to do those tasks or activities? Then you've got labor, either paying workers or yourself to do those tasks. You need to keep track of that. And then marketing, selling requires time and inputs and labor. So those are the time, inputs, labor, and time are the three things that you're going to hear over and over today. And then there's, you've got your equipment costs and implements and those types of, if you're growing transplants and all of those factors into that. So when you add all these together, inputs plus crop practices plus time plus labor plus marketing plus activities, gives you your overall production costs. And this was what feeds into the crop budgets for each and every crop. As in an earlier slide, it showed in there about, that some growers have lots and lots of crops. So maybe it's not, maybe you just don't have enough time to work it all out for 70 or so crops. But you can certainly put these crops into categories. So a lot of those crops may fall into the category of greens. But if you're also doing high tunnel production as well as field crops, you may want to keep your tunnel production as a separate cost of production, just because there's some different costs worked in there. You want to keep better track of that. High tunnels are pricey real estate, and you really need to get your money back from that investment. Another crop group is just solanaceous crops, and just remember, if you're staking, you've got to put in the cost for stakes, labor for staking and stringing, and then taking it all down, putting it away, cleaning it to remove disease problems. So those are some added costs. You could block together all your squash, all your brassicas, or your root crops. So you can take a lot of those, those 60, 70 different crops and get it down to 5, a basic 5, 10, 20, whatever it is that you want to, how specific do you want to get with it? You could do it all as one, and just do it one large, everything's treated the same. You growing it on the same spacing. It's taking up the same amount of real estate. But that's really, you end up with a generalized number. It may be good to, if that's the way you want to start off, but I do, suggest that you really start becoming a little bit more specific on some of these things, because there could be some significant differences that will, that you want to keep track of. Especially if you've got a pricey specialty crop mixed in that group, or like I said, high tunnel stuff. And so using the concepts that Richard Wiswall put together, he broke everything down, a lot of things down, also by the unit, his field grown units. He grew everything on the bed system. All of his beds were 350 feet long, had multiple rows in there. So two 350-foot beds with double rows conveniently works out to be about 1/10 of an acre. So you're in that acre, so you've got a unit measure there. But so you can do it that way. You could do the square foot, linear foot, bed length by width. In tunnels, you might looking at doing the bed method. For some crops may just fit better if you're just doing open ground in rows or by linear feet, or if you get really large plantings, you can go into that fraction or full acre unit. But you want to figure out things per unit so that you can compare. That's the important thing. You want to break it down so that it makes sense on a scale that's easily comprehensible. And then when you want to scale back up, it's easy to do the computations. So per unit, you're adding up all of your inputs and associated practice costs, your labor, time, as I mentioned before. And then when you're adding in your marketing costs, your overhead costs, that gives you your subtotal cost per crop. So that's part of that end result there. And then if you take those subtotal costs per crop times your total unit of area times the number of crops, gives you your full total cost of production over a season. And then if you subtract from that all you take your total sales of all those crops, subtract out your total costs. That gives you your end result, hopefully a big profit. So getting into the nuts and bolts, collecting that information, it's tiring, it's tedious. It's a routine that you have to get into, but it's necessary. Usually about now we get a question in there, is there an app for that? I have looked at the question of apps for a number of years. I've talked to growers who say, oh yeah, I just got this new app for, for record keeping. And so I check back with them in a couple of seasons and see, and they're like, well, it really didn't do what I wanted it to do. It was a little bit more cumbersome. So I ended up not using it. So I don't have something in front of me that I can really highly recommend. I can tell you that one program that it's sort of basic, and I know some growers that are using it, is just Google Docs, working that off of a smartphone or a tablet seems to have done a really good job for them. They've got workers, all their workers have smartphones, and so they put them in charge of certain crops in certain fields, and they keep track of their records, post it onto their onto the Google Docs, and then they share it amongst the workers and the farmer. So they have instant information right there at their fingertips. So when it comes to filling orders or knowing, how, what the yields are for any given day during harvest season, they've got that information. So that's some really important things. But I mean, you can go as simple as a clipboard with some sheets in there, and write down your categories and just kind of fill in columns and rows. There's some Excel sheets that you could use as well. That they all fit in that. Using Excel, that's the one I'm a little bit more used to, but I guess there's Google Sheets can do the same thing. That they've got formula functions that can help add and subtract rows and columns and things. So it does help. Once you get the hang of it, it's useful information can come from there. So let's jump into building this all together. So starting off with labor, we want to calculate out all the hours workers are down for, and how much you're paying them. And don't forget to include yourself. Yes, pay yourself a wage right away. Start with that. It isn't what it's left over at the end of the year is your wage. That is your profit. What you need to include what you're paying yourself into that calculation. That way you're guaranteed that at least you're making something. So you could put down your owner in there, and I'll show you an example of a spreadsheet in a minute. So you wrote down, you've got additional worker costs, perhaps workman's comp, payroll, taxes, things like that can be put in there. If you've got workers receiving different wages based on experience or whatever, you may want to keep track of that specifically, or you can estimate it, run an average on the percent time spent per worker, or whatever. So you don't want to end up with how much you're really putting aside per hour for yourself and your workers. So something like this, you've got you're paying yourself $15 an hour. You got new workers getting paid $15. Maybe you've got somebody who's been coming back for a couple of years. It's a good worker. Maybe you got them going in at 18 or more. Then you've got employee taxes, workman's comp costs. So you work that out on a per hour basis. And then you end up with your labor costs for yourself and for an experienced person. So let's just $19.40 per hour is what it's costing you for paying that experienced worker if you're doing these types of additions. All right, move to marketing. So if you're doing farmers markets, you've got the labor of running inventories, loading trucks, traveling to the market, setting up and selling, loading that truck back up, unloading, taking an inventory, putting things back in the cooler if there's leftovers for the next market day. You've got vehicle costs. You may have equipment that lasts for several years, so you might want to amortize that cost over 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it might be. You've got supply costs per season, so it could be small signs, produce bags, boxes, elastic bands, whatever. You may be paying market fees. You may have market insurance. You need to put all that in there. If you're accepting credit cards or doing those types of ways of getting cash other than cash, those have associated costs as well. Then you want to figure out the costs going to market, and this is where you could divide it across the number of crops that you bring. So maybe you don't want to. Maybe you're not bringing. Maybe you're bringing just 20 crops. Maybe you're bringing 5 different different types of crops. Whatever that number is that you decide on, put that in there. In this example, it's like bringing 20 crops to the market. So that kind of roughly works out to be 5% of your farmers market costs can be attributed to each crop. So you have a spreadsheet that kind of looks like this. You've got your labor broken down, number of hours, number of workers. You figure all that out in there. Your vehicle costs going to and from, round trip, your rental fees per day at the market, equipment. And you're going to want to do this like for each market you go to, or if it's the same for each of them, each market day, then just multiply that out. But total costs end up being $393 across that, divided by the number of crops you bring. So the marketing costs per crop, it's about almost $20. So if you're running a CSA, you've got similar setup costs. You've got your labor, pulling, looking at your inventory, packing the containers, pickup site setups, reviewing which, if you have multiple types of memberships, signage, newsletters, communication time spent at the pickup site. Maybe if you've got multiple sites and you're bringing stuff to, you've got to include vehicle costs and all of that to and from. Wholesaling, similar costs, similar way of looking at it with wholesaling as it is with retailing. You can divide it out by the number of crops again. But and you've got the labor of, maybe it's loading your trucks, driving it out to the buyer, unloading it, or maybe they unload it, whatever. You get your vehicle costs. You've got some amortized costs in there, supply costs as well. You've got more record keeping, perhaps. So that's an added thing you have to consider. Maybe you're dealing with a lot more quantity, so it takes longer to harvest and loading and things like that. You may have to grade and to a specific level or sizing to meet the buyer's needs. And then you may be doing more wash pack, packaging, labeling. If you're running, if you're following food safety, specifically if you have like a GAPS certification or something like that, there's time spent with all of that kind of thing. A lot of wholesalers requiring, wholesale accounts require that. So moving on, one of the things that's often overlooked when you're looking at ag budgets are overhead costs. This is often left out. It is all the associated costs that go into having a business, but it isn't production and marketing. It's often made up of, if you buy a house with 5 acres, has a barn on it, and you decide you're going to grow vegetables on there, so part of that property the property's associated costs can be, a percentage of that can be put towards the business end of that. So this is some of the stuff that it includes. You're part of that mortgage payment of the living part of the house. There's part of that which is business. So you can kind of estimate, how much of that might be 50-50, however you want to put it in there. So you've got property taxes, insurance, all of these. So your overhead costs could be fractions of this. It could be it could be all of the categories, depending on what it is. That is all important considerations. And often overhead costs can be really high. That's why I think some people like that it's often overlooked, because when they look at how high it is, they're like, oh, how do I figure that into that? This is crazy. Well, you break it up all over, you work it into the overall production, and the overall crop sales that you have, and it actually breaks down into a smaller number. From Wiswall's example, like I said, he figured everything on 350-foot beds. And so his unit of measure was 2 350-foot beds. So on 5 acres, that actually works out. If you farmed all of those 5 acres, it would be about 100 beds altogether. So he broke down his overhead costs from $19,000 to $383 per 2 beds. So let's start getting into some production. So you've got your seeding and transplant production costs. There's a lot of items in there that for consideration. So right now everybody's out trying seeding, getting their plants going. So you've got soil, you've got cell trays, inserts, whatever it is that you're using, the soil blocks. All of those you need to take into consideration your costs, what you have to purchase per season, what can be amortized over a couple of seasons. So there, somebody actually figured out that a 5-gallon bucket of scoop soil, bulk soil, is 1/8 of a cubic foot. So you can get it down to the cell level practically on this. From one of Wiswall's spreadsheets on there, he did bedding plants as well as vegetable transplants. I stuck in on the bottom there for a 72 cell insert with a 1020 tray. When you work it all out, each of for all of those costs, soil, labor, all of those, all the things that go into it, each tray filled is costing you $1.35. So if you're doing 300 trays, that's and that may not be a huge amount of money. If you're doing 1,000 trays, it really starts adding up. So knowing that number can be very important. If you're growing transplants, don't forget, if you're putting them in greenhouses or high tunnels, there's inputs that go along with that as well. Getting into the meat and potatoes here, tractors and equipment, irrigation costs. You want to figure out your hourly cost of operating that. Large ticket items with long useful lives, you can spread out those costs over a bunch of years. So you divide those costs over the given years and to reflect depreciation as well. Then you want to look at number of hours, or estimate number of hours used per season. And you think about it, all of the different activities you might use a tractor for, or a wagon, or whatever. It can add up. Then you've got fuel costs, and the prices of that have really skyrocketed lately. And then you've got the labor for time to operate that. And the irrigation, similar type of thing. It costs you money to set things up, especially if you're doing like overhead and you've got to run around moving a lot of pipe around, 10 or 15, 20 times during the season or more. That's got to account for that. Here's another spreadsheet example on that. some of these original price, useful life of different types of tractors. So he's figuring 25 years. Whatever you think you can get out of a piece of equipment, use that number. So that works it out per year. And then it breaks it down to, tractor with driver per hour, $25.70 to operate that, just the tractor alone. And work this out for your implements as well. So you've got, whatever the costs are, their number of years. Maybe it was a little bit optimistic at 20 years for a brush hog. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little low for a manure spreader. But those, it works out, small amount of money per hour, but it's still there. Time. This is one thing that growers seem to have, really have trouble trying to track down how long it takes for activities to be completed. You don't need a stopwatch, to time everybody. But if you get, you could delegate some of this information gathering to workers. If you've got teams out there doing, they can keep track of what time do they start and then what time do they finish, and things like that. So but it's really important to get an idea just how long does it take to complete all the activities on the farm. Where does your money go when you're paying somebody? This is where you want to break it down to. So list out all the activities, estimate the time it takes to get a task done. You can do that now. And then, kind of keep track over the course of a season. And then at the end of the year, go back and use the numbers that you figured and compare it to the estimates that you might put together now, and adjust accordingly. So you want to keep track during that season, refigure those calculations as needed. And this exercise gives you really clear indication of what's taking the most time, and maybe even, some people, you might know, some people are getting jobs done faster than others. Could be important as we go along to talk about that. So where can you improve efficiency? What it might take, and weeding is always there on the top of the list. If you have to go, if you're tilling with a tractor, but you still have to go back and bring in a crew to do hand weeding, maybe if the tillage or the cultivation was improved somehow, maybe another piece of equipment, you could cut out the labor of having people to hand weed or hoeing. Maybe he's moving from overhead irrigation to a different type of, maybe it's drip or whatever. Unstaked tomatoes may take a lot longer to harvest than staked ones. Maybe it's you're having problems in the wash pack shed. Things aren't taking you too long to set it up for each day's use. Whatever it is, this is where you can figure it out. So let's start. All right. So we're the season's under the way. We've got the everything ready to go. Soil prep. You've got these are examples of the types of activities that go on during that time of the year. For each of those, you want how much time did it take, and labor units involved, what's your equipment costs, was there any inputs purchased? So maybe you're spreading some fertilizer or adding some herbicide or whatever. Those types of things get worked into here. And you want to collect data. So for the next few slides, everything you want to collect the data on all these things. So and you keep track how many times did you have to use do these types of activities with that equipment. Seeding and transplanting, if you direct seeding or if you're going to go transplant out there, so you've got associated activities, and then for each of those, again, time, labor, equipment, inputs. Field work. So if you're using, putting out row cover, if you're hand weeding or hoeing, adding mulch, whatever these, this list might be longer for you, might be shorter, depending on how you do things. But you want to keep track of all that information. Then you want to, get ready for harvest and then actually do the harvest. That takes time. And so there's quite a list here. Could be bigger, as I said. And then at the end of the year, finally finished, all done. Well, you still have to, put everything away, clean up afterwards. So that's time that you need to add as well. If you're putting in cover crop, the cost of seed or whatever, adding maybe spreading manure. This is the time to add that to the accounts. So now we've gone through all of those categories, and it's time to kind of put it all together. So you're adding up all these pieces: pre-plant plus direct seeding and transplanting, plus field work, plus pre-harvest, plus harvest, plus post-harvest, plus your overhead costs and your marketing costs equals your total costs per crop. So then you take that cost of your crop and then you mark it up to give you your selling price. So it's over, this is the amount, it's over and above what your costs are, and that's going to give you your profit at the end of the day. So don't be afraid to mark it up high. You're growing the best quality produce there is. You're proud of what you grow, and you want to get your price for it. Don't feel like you have to, that it has to be lower. There's this great myth out there that's ruining farming, I think, is this myth of that food has to be cheap. It costs to grow it, and you need to be paid for it. I mean, the car manufacturers and car dealers aren't ashamed to jack their prices up. I think it's time farmers do the same thing as well. But you need to adjust your prices based on the data. And that's what this exercise is all about. You're collecting this information so that you can make informed decisions. So the next few slides are taken from a crop budget based on all of the costs that were added up as we went through. So this is again, this is for bush beans that were grown on 2 double row beds, 350 foot long. Again, that's 1/10 of an acre. This is from Wiswall's budgets, crop budgets. So he's got, for the soil prep and these top items, the consideration is for his labor was 106, equipment 22, supply costs 50. And get the harvest. He harvested 500 pounds, took 42 hours. And then field to pack house and the associated costs above, plus, packing, getting everything ready to go into the cooler, and then, bagging for the packaging. Those numbers are all there. So it's post-harvest, looking at labor, equipment, and supplies. It was mowing, disking, cover crop, seeding. So adding up from the previous page to this one, so now we're up to $660 in labor, equipment, supplies are all increasing. You're adding in your marketing costs to that, for those beans. So your total crop costs, for labor is over $730. Equipment still $29.88 for supplies. Then you get $853. You add your overhead costs as from the previous example. So you get a grand total of $1,141 to grow 500 pounds of beans. So if you're setting a price without knowing this kind of information, let's just say that you're going to the farmer's market, you've got your beans are in 1 pound units, and you're selling them at $2 each because the person next to you at the farmer's market always sells theirs for $2. So you're matched there. So if you sold all 500 pounds, it's $1,000 in sales. So if you minus sales minus all your costs, so 1,000 minus 1,141 means you've lost almost $142. Not a good thing. Setting prices, knowing the data. So if you've got 500 pounds that you're selling, you want to come up with unit cost. So you divide the total costs by the harvest amount, gives you $2.28 a pound. So that's the minimum you have to sell it for just to break even. Right? Just to break even, it's going to be $2.28 a pound. So let's just say then that you're going to sell it for $2.50 a pound because you've got 3 people that's surrounding you that's selling theirs for $2 a pound, but you're going to sell yours for $2.50 a pound. And you're going to have a really nice sign, and you're going to have a nice display that really shows off these really gorgeous beans. So if you set it at $2.50 times 500, you get $1,250 minus your costs of $1,141, gives you a small profit of $108. But it's a profit. And remember, you've paid yourself already on this. This covers all of your costs, and you made this profit. So profit equals your income from sales minus your total expenses, as I've already mentioned. So knowing if you made a profit or not per crop gives you some really valuable information and helps you answer those big questions we covered in the beginning. So since that was a loss on those beans, I don't want to leave that. So there was a loss there. So let's use that data collected on the costs to figure out where changes might be able to be made. If it's a loss, how much? Why? Where? So it appears like too much labor may have been spent weeding, or inefficient labor during harvesting. And remember from that example, it's 42 hours to harvest 500 pounds of beans. Maybe there's a better way of doing that. Finding a better way to weed. Maybe there's a better way of harvesting. Maybe you've got slow pickers. Maybe you need, find somebody that can pick beans faster. Maybe growing pole beans instead of bush beans. Maybe that's faster. Maybe if you think you can sell a lot of beans, maybe buying a mechanical bean picker might be a way around that. If you can find one used, that might become, you might be able to sell more beans, pay for the mechanical harvester by not paying a bunch of people to, spend 42 hours picking beans. I have one grower that did that a number of years ago. He had, it was five people picking beans, taking like a total of 16 or 20 hours total, man hours to pick beans. He got a mechanical bean picker. He did the same. He could pick what 5 people did in that amount of time in about 20 minutes. That bean picker paid for itself. It was used. Brand new ones are really unbelievably expensive, but used ones are available. Or maybe the answer is you don't grow beans at all, especially if you've got everybody else is selling beans, and if they're certainly probably not making any more money than you are at $2 a pound. They're probably losing money. So maybe you don't want to grow beans. Maybe you can do better on something else. There's also a thing, and I'll touch on, about benchmarking labor costs. That there's some interest in that. It's figuring out how much time certain tasks really should be taking, and you measure your labor against that to see where you fall in line. I'll talk about that in a minute. Having inventory sheets is really important, I think. It's a good piece of information. Lists what crops are available that you're bringing to market, gives you all sorts, you can add all sorts of information into that so that you can easily come up with, with how much is sold at the end of the day, by knowing how much you brought minus how much is left at the end of the day. Gives you how much that you've sold. You can keep track of different markets and these types of things. Really important information. It also gives you, amount of each crop that was brought to market is good harvest record information. If you don't do that already, here's an easy sheet to put together for that kind of thing. So just going to kind of wrap up here. So Richard Wiswald, his book is The Organic Farmer's Handbook. You can find that online. Chelsea Green Publishers puts it out. I think you can get it through Amazon as well. He has a lot of crop budgets there, from quite the number in there. Plus, he's got some empty crop templates and blank ones that you can build your own if you're so inclined. But you don't have to be organic to use this information. Plus, the book has a lot of other things, really useful business information that's in there. So it makes an interesting read. But like I said, it has a CD-ROM, it has Excel spreadsheets that you can use. I've got a couple of examples of, as I've showed already. But you can play around with changing the numbers in these scenarios in there. And if the only fault I have with it is that the sheets that are used for when you're filling them out for figuring out your labor costs, your market costs, and all those costs, they're not linked to the crop budgets. But if you have somebody that who's good with Excel spreadsheets, they can create links so that when you put the information in on those on your sheets, like equipment costs and those types of things, it automatically changes the crop budget sheets, and it makes it really a much more useful tool. And you can change around the selling price to see how much money you would be making. There's a lot there that you can use this for. So here's just like that bean sheet. So it's a very long spreadsheet on there. So I just put pieces of that in there to show you as you're working through each of the section. From the cultivation to the harvest, post-harvest, your marketing costs, and then you work it down to your sales. So he's got both. Works in there wholesale and retail opportunities. You can change around these price, setting the price, setting the yields, the amount of time that it costs, that it takes to do things. You can change these all around. Then it gives you your net profits, and then you can play around with numbers to see, all right, when do I make a real profit, not a loss, and come up with that. So really important stuff. There's another set of sheets out there that it's all, unfortunately, they're not Excel spreadsheets. They're just sheets of information. New England vegetable crop budgets was put together by UMass and University of New Hampshire back around 2000. It doesn't have a lot of different crops. Has the major ones. There's the link to them. And they don't have quite all of the same costs in there either. Like they don't have overhead costs in there and some of your selling costs. But here's an example on peppers. So this sheet goes over all of the kind of like the activities that go on in the field for growing peppers on an acre. Here's all the labor costs. They break it out between experienced labor or labor that you're retaining and new labor. So there's two different pay rates there. Then you've got cash expenses per acre for your chemical inputs and all those types of things. It's all worked out. You've got all the equipment costs in there. So there's more types of equipment here than on what Wiswald's has listed. And then it's a summary of the budget. So, total production costs for an acre of peppers, $4,866. So then he gives these gross revenue chart. So based on yield of 1 1/9 bushel box, it's sold at different various prices. This is on various yields. This is how much of the sales. And then if you subtract out the costs to that, so you can see that there's losses, at $6 and $8 per box at if your yields are 750 boxes per acre, and then it works its way up. So it's got some good information, interesting stuff there. So I'd say, you know, if you could put both of these together, it could be a great resource for you. So knowing your costs help answer these big questions. Efficiency helps a lot, but you know, you got to know where and how and what's impacted. If you're going to take on debt, you got to be move cautiously and base it on real numbers and the figuring out how to be paid. Be conservative. Don't be overly optimistic. Be conservative. You know, we're having a situation now, you know, where we're seeing, you know, and our next presentation here, we're talking about protecting your investment. You know, with these extreme weather events, we're seeing more and more total losses than I think what we have had in the past. So I think it's a good thing now to really be thinking about that. And then benchmarking, as mentioned before, this got out of Iowa State University. They've started looking at benchmarking, and I just found this, so I haven't really had a chance to go through it, but it's looking at some various crops and the time it takes for labor to complete the tasks. So there we go. And then, like I said, got FSA coming up with Joann in a minute. So stay tuned for that, please. So I can take a few questions before we start.
Robert, I'll ask you a question. This is Steve.
Okay.
Why do you think it is that universities across the country, they used to provide all this budget information, and now Cornell stopped doing it years ago. I guess they were ahead of their time, but you just can't find it anymore. Is it just because of the time it takes, or what?
I think so. And it's funny, when I started looking at this actually about 8 or 10 years ago, was looking at cost of production. And then I sort of did a literature review of what was available. So let's see. So that was like 2012. So between 2010, 2012, I started digging through stuff. So yeah, you're right. There were a lot of universities that provided this information. And if you went looking at at what they had there, and then go look at their references, a lot of them would refer back to some previous work. And then you go to those, and a lot of them go back to previous work even further back. And a lot of them ended up at the same place that I found. It was University of Kentucky back in like the 1970s, growing cabbage. and that was and so it was based on a state that was, you know, and a time frame when things were a whole lot cheaper, and labor was ridiculously low price, and so I think a lot of it was just out of step with reality, and then a lot of ag business programs just I don't know, they just didn't have the resources or the time to really dig into it. So you're right, there is not a lot of really current, fresh information out there, you know, for our area that's really relevant. So these are the two sources, the UMass and the Richard Wiswalls are the two, you know, that I go to, because they seem to, you know, at least be more reflective of what's really going on.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, we do have a question in the chat from Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for growers dealing with customer pushback on price increases at farmers markets?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it really has, you know, I've seen customers will argue over you know, like a bunch of radishes, you know, like 18 radishes in a bunch, because I counted the bunch on this when I saw this happen. It was the farmer was selling it for 75 cents for 18 radishes, and the customer didn't want to pay more than 50. When you and then walked away because it wouldn't lower the price. I think I really, I'm convinced, you know, if you've got a customer like that, you're never going to make them happy. You know, they have this impression that farmers don't I don't know, don't deserve money or something. I don't know. They're doing it for the love of it. I don't know. I've heard this rather recently over the winter, that farmers who are, trying to push up their prices, and customers were saying, well, why are you charging more than a supermarket? Well, you're comparing apples to oranges. You've got vine ripe, fresh, high quality product. It's grown right here, with a farmer you can go back to week after week, or buying this great product, and it is much better than what you're going to find in the supermarket for the most part. And going into, where did that product come from? Who grew it? How far did it travel? Did it even come from this country? And those types of things. I think you tie that in with having some really nice merchandising. I mean, putting together a really nice display, lots of signage, and talk about, how good the crop is, how, what it takes to grow it. Don't be afraid to tell them, it's not, this is, cheap food is a myth, and it has a cost associated with it. And I'm giving you a better product than you'll ever find in a supermarket. That's my advice. And I go, my wife's a cut flower grower. I go to the farmer's market with her, and it's, and you have to sell it. I mean, you've got to, it doesn't sell itself anymore. You've really got to, and I've watched the growers all around me, the ones who just stand there and don't say anything and just sit there while the customers pick things out or not, versus other ones who start up a conversation, and talk about their produce. And explain why it costs more. I've got a couple of growers who are adamant they sell a small box of cherry tomatoes, $5. That's their price, and then they say, here, taste one. This is the best tomato you're going to ever eat, and he sells out. So, be proud of what you got. Push it.
All right. So basically, the Farm Service Agency, I'll just do a brief overview. What we're here for is to help any type farmer, any size, any type grower of commodities to implement. There's generally county offices in most counties. Sometimes there is shared county, but we're here to kind of help manage and support our local farmers. I'll kind of just skip through these slides real quick, and then I'm going to get into some of the fact sheets that I think are going to be a little bit more helpful in regard to what the next step is, possibly if you are interested with participating with the Farm Service Agency or a sister USDA agency. And basically, we are here to try to help protect the American farmers. I'm going to go over some programs that are disaster weather related that can possibly assist some local growers. And this is kind of an overview of New York State. So there is, and one change here, Karen Rugenstein in our local Ontario County has retired, but we do still have a farm loan team working diligently. So if lending or finances are needed, but this kind of gives an overview of all of our counties for New York State. We have farm loan programs and farm programs. So if you need lending opportunities, this is a nice, looks like a sugar shack. And we do have storage loans that we do have for low interest or hoop houses, a different type of lending opportunities. And beginning farmers, and I kind of put this in here, if anybody is a beginning farmer meaning probably reporting on your taxes. You may have grown up on a farm your whole life or been involved in farms, but when it's actually your farm and you're reporting it for taxes purposes, and under 10 years, you are considered a beginning farmer. And when I go over the NAP program, that give you some cost savings where you can have some entry-level coverage at no additional fees. So beginning farmer, you can certify to that. There's a form for that. And then this presentation was put in the box. The link should hopefully work and you would be able to find further information about beginning farmers. There's a lot of information on our website. And then getting into risk coverage and also grant opportunities. USDA does have a lot of grant opportunities. A lot of people ask about them. Currently, it appears American Marketing Services are doing a lot of our grant opportunities. Another is they could be USDA funded, but you may want to check with New York State Ag and Markets. They may also have something. And then here's a big one that we're talking about. Risk is for the Risk Management Agency, RMA, or crop insurance. And that link can take you to some protection. And I do have a specialty crop fact sheet that I supplied that can kind of give you an overview of weather-related losses or income losses in regard to your farm operation. And that you do go through, there's a locator that you can find it right through crop insurance agents that actually sell to local producers for crop coverage. And this is the NAP, and there's a fact sheet. So I just did kind of a highlight of it. This is for the protection for you for weather-related losses. It's called our non-insured crop assistance program. This is when financial crop insurance is not available through risk management through the regular crop insurance. So maybe they don't cover tomatoes or peppers or garlic or flowers. The non-insured assistance crop assistance program, often referred to as NAP, can help you with that. And if you're a beginning farmer or a female farmer, socially disadvantaged, or a veteran farmer, that's also a beginning farmer, the entry level fee is waived for that. So you would have the 50% loss level with 55% of the price. Not to get too far in it, I think you would want to reach out to the Farm Service Agency and have them go over details. And the fact sheet does do a good job of covering that. So if one of those categories, you may want to look into it. It's no matter what size farm you are. The one thing I do want to, and Robert touched upon this often, is the record keeping. So the non-insured, the NAP program does need record keeping because it is off of your producer yield. So our benefit is developed by the yield that you have on your farm. These are some deadlines. So March 15th, which is just less than a week away, is next Tuesday. Make sure you reach out to the Farm Service Agency. Most of our spring seeded crops are coming up for next Tuesday if you do want the NAP coverage for that. So make sure you contact that FSA office. And Robert had the locator link there in his presentation that you can find and get that coverage if that's something that suits you, that protects you with weather-related losses. It is a little bit of work up at the beginning because we developed a 3-year history to be able to get your yield established for that. But it is good protection, other weather-related losses. And you do have to have this coverage in place prior to the weather event, because sometimes FSA does have disaster programs, but this is an insurance. It's like other insurance, you need to have it in place prior to the loss. The other thing that comes in with that, and regardless of whether you do the NAP program or crop insurance or that, we recommend that you crop report with us. There's no cost for crop reporting unless it's late filed past our crop reporting deadline. Here's a highlight of what our deadlines. July 15th is kind of a big one for most of our spring seeded crops, your tomatoes, your peppers, and you know, most of the veggie type crops. So keep that in mind. Oftentimes the crop reporting is our foundation that builds off of most of our programs. We did have some pandemic assistance, and that way we know that that producer exists and we can try to reach out to you to keep you informed of any programs that also could help above and beyond maybe the NAP program. So that's crop reporting, keep that in mind. And then to work with the USDA, here is also another link for finding the local office. We're fortunate in New York State, things have been improving. We are open by appointment now, so please always call ahead and FSA office can make an appointment for you and get you a farm and track. We do have rooftop now, we have hoop houses. There's not an acreage requirement or size, but generally speaking, it's for commercial farm operations, you know, your your home garden would include, but anybody, going to farmers markets, those type, or selling a stand at your farm, you may want to get set up with us at the Farm Service Agency. And generally what you need is just, would need your name and address. And if you are going to be earning program benefits with us of participating, like NAP, and actually purchasing the coverage, we would need to know if you're an individual, your social security number, because payments are tracked through that. Or if you're an entity, it would be your EIN number. And then proof of ownership or leases, we can work through that. We, in Ontario County, Monroe, we do have a means to kind of find out ownership, and we can also vet, if it's rented ground, that we have the right operator on that. So registering your farm with the Farm Service Agencies, there are no fees associated with that of getting a farm and a track. Just call ahead. And we want to make sure that we're inclusive. It's all sorts of farmers that we'd like to reach out to, any size and background. So please reach out to the Farm Service Agency. And then here are some website information. There's a ton of information out there, so it can be overwhelming. So it may be beneficial to contact the Farm Service Agency, and they can go over, our programs with you and help you navigate through that. And I'll hold it. Is there any questions currently for me of anything that anybody'd like answered? And then here's some contacts. I just did some surrounding ones. So in case, in regard to that, would be available for contact the Monroe County, Wayne County, Ontario County. But obviously you can find that, you can call any one of these offices, and we can get you any other office that may be needed for that. I think what would be also very beneficial is to go over some of the fact sheets that Steve and Robert has placed in the, so I'll share those. And this is a kind of a, can everybody see that? Let me see here.
Joanne, we do have a question in the chat. Would you like to take it now?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
So we have a question from Matthew. Could you talk a little bit more on the Hoop House grants?
For the Hoop House, it's not necessarily a grant, but that's our sister agency, Natural Resource and Conservation Service. They do have hoop houses projects that they do through some conservation programs that they have for the hoop houses. So you could contact FSA, and we can certainly refer you over for Natural Resource and Conservation Services. I know Ontario County has had a great success with some hoop houses for some local growers. I think other neighboring towns have had opportunities as well to assist with getting hoop houses established, and that's through our sister agency, NRCS.
Awesome. We do have another question as well.
Great.
Does it need to be a specific amount of time to acquire an FSA ID number?
There's not an amount of time. It's not like the IRS where you submit for a tax ID. You come in and you self-certify how you're like farming. So if you're an individual, we would be just getting your name and address and your social security number. If you're a joint venture and you have a tax ID, we would be getting that. Some of our local growers have gotten, into an LLC and incorporated. So we just want to match however you are actually farming. We match that up to our farm records. So if you've applied for an EIN number, that SS4 form you get back would be helpful because it has exactly how your name appears and how your ID number is established, because that does connect through, the government agencies. All right.
All set.
Okay. And this is a new farmers. This is like getting started. This is one of our newer fact sheets. It's actually very helpful. This is the new farmers. They were kind enough to put it in the Cornell box of doing it for the new farmers of getting started. It kind of gives you a 101. It has the Farm Service Agency. It talks about our Natural Resource and Conservation Services. It has that Risk Management Agency. That's where the crop insurance part of it comes in. Rural development's listed here. If there's any producers that have a value added, So possibly you have berries that you're picking that you're going to be going in and doing jams into. They have a value added program. It's a grant program that you submit an application for. That's another sister USDA agency to not overlook, that there might be available to you for funding opportunities for that. And then, of course, our cooperative extension is a great valuable resource that helps us with, yield information or crop development, a variety of information to help assist with our program administration. And then here's getting started, make an appointment, and then we would vet with you what to bring. Bring your ID information, how you operate your farm. We'd want to know where your farm is. So if you do decide to crop report it, that we have that available. If that isn't already in the system, we get you a farm and track assigned to that. And then we kind of go over maybe what type of programs you might be interested in, maybe the NAP program. We have a farm storage facility loan program that helps with funding, say that you need a truck to go to farmer's market. That's available. Cold storage, they've really expanded upon that. So we'd kind of talk to you about that on number 3. And this kind of gives you a 101. We'll get you a farm number and a track. We would, kind of make sure we know about the Food Security Act and what the eligibility is to participate with our programs. That leads us into the 80-10-26. There is compliance that we have for our programs. And then some eligibility, if you were interested in participating, a producer has to certify that their income after expenses is less than or more than $900,000. And then go over your program application, maybe crop reporting, get you connected to us if you want emails for our Gov delivery bulletins or to receive text messages. And then we would kind of go over your acreage reporting, and then, keeping in touch with us, and our Gov delivery is making sure that we try to reach out to you to let you know of any programs coming up. And then, can you still see this now? Okay. For the crop
Yes.
acreage reporting?
Yes.
Okay. And that's really the foundation of kind of getting started after you get your farm and track, is we encourage crop reporting, because if there is a pandemic program that comes up, then we would know. We had an opportunity for people that had gross sales that were hurt during the pandemic to be invited to participate if they were interested in that. As well as crop reporting is going to be required for the NAP program. I think this also pairs with what Robert was saying about the record keeping. We are going to have your rows and your spacing because that does matter. So if your rows are 12 feet apart versus 6 feet or 10, that's going to make a big difference on your yield information. So we can kind of go over some of our standard spacing and to be able to get the appropriate acreage, because we would want to have that reflected properly to help with your yield information. So I think Robert gave a lot of good information and overview about how you report and how to measure for your crops. That information would be asked so that we could capture your crop reporting acres accurately. And then here's just kind of an overview. Again, like beginning farmer, contacting us for an appointment. For most of our spring seeded crops, again, it is going to be July 15th. We do have a big peak of crop reporting, so I would contact the FSA office sooner than later to make sure you get on the radar if you are interested in getting your crops reported. This sheet here is just an overview of disaster assistance. I kind of left it in because it does show variety of the Farm Service Agency. It's listed here for the NAP program. If you have fruit trees and they're lost to an ice storm or something, there's a TAP program. Or if it's grapevines that are lost, that we do, or Christmas trees, that program may be of interest disaster related wise to help eliminate some of the expenses. The TAP program helps you to replant if you lose Christmas trees due to a weather event or grapevines. The non-insured assistance program is that revenue protection that Robert spoke about. And if you are a beginning farmer or an SBA or a veteran beginning farmer, that fee is waived for the entry level, the $325 per crop, up to $825 is waived. So that may be an interest to you, because then it would be, you know, kind of catastrophe type coverage for you. And then here gives it all the crop insurance. That's through risk management agency. You would contact a local agent. You could go to the RMA website and they'll give you an agent locator. I really highly recommend kind of talking around and seeing if you do decide that, because they do have some specialty crop coverage that they've just come out with, is try to talk around just if to other producers, if they are using crop insurance, what agent they use. You would want an agent that's familiar with crops, maybe more so than just your vehicle coverage or your barn coverage, that they're knowledgeable about crops and what they're covering for that. So that's kind of in a nutshell, an overview. And again, here's NRCS. If you have loss to physical losses, erosion, or different environmental problems that are on your farm, they may be able to assist with some of the conservation planning for you on your farm. And then here, not to get too far into the weeds on things, if you make an appointment, we would, Farm Service Agency would go over that NAP program with you. Crops that aren't covered under conventional crop insurance. So it can be a little bit tricky. Cabbage in Ontario County, you can get that right through conventional crop insurance. So we wouldn't have the NAP coverage for you. But if you're in another neighboring county that cabbage is not insurable, then we would offer you the NAP program. So there's some specifics by even counties. The coverage level, that entry level coverage is the kind of the one that I mentioned, the $325 up to $825 if you're just in one county, that covers then all your crops. If you're a multi-county, there is a maximum of that as well. And then, as I stated, there is beginning farmer, limited resource, and other means to be able to help you to waive those fees if you qualify. And then if you decide to do the buy-up, say you want to protect yourself more than just the entry level coverage of 50% loss and 55% of the price, you can actually go up to 65% production loss, so a 35 loss and 100% of the price. And it's a calculation by your number of acres to try to have it be more suited to covering what do you have out there is of coverage opportunities of your risk, and then multiply. And we have a tool that we could run for you to give you a little bit of an idea. And if you are one of those beginning farmers or socially disadvantaged, you get 50% off of the buy-up coverage. And I do want to kind of relay on what Robert was talking about is the record keeping. It doesn't have to be fancy, but you do have to have record keeping. So even if you have a tally, a pick tally sheet of, each day of what you're doing, because a lot of times you aren't writing out receipts. It's not going to be like a wholesale operation, but we do have a means of still assisting those smaller operations, but you do have to keep track of your crop production. So that's kind of goes over, if you're interested, contact the FSA office and we can go into specifics for you on that. And then this is the one that is for the specialty crop. This is through risk management. That's where you would actually go to a crop insurance agency and they would go over like a whole farm revenue. Maybe you're not as good of a record keeping. Well, maybe then this would be a better suited fit for you where it goes over comparison of revenue. If you don't have that other record keeping, this is a whole farm revenue protection insurance program. And for the details on that, we don't currently, we don't administer it. So you would want to go through your agent to have them go through that or look through the fact sheet. And there is a link for going over to specifics on that. And here's that locator tool. I mentioned on the second page, it'll go where can you buy those? This written agreement, so say maybe Yates County doesn't cover cabbage. Well, they can maybe do a written agreement saying, yes, the neighboring county does, so you can actually get it through crop insurance if that's a better fit for you. For the risk protection, a couple different resources, Farm Service Agency, as well as our crop insurance through risk management. Is there any other questions? So I appreciate the opportunity to be invited, and hopefully that's helpful of resources for local producers.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and thank you to Robert. Wow, those were really interesting talks.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.